Hi, I'm Tristan, and this is Thinking About Politics. So today we want to start by again saying that we have the brave people of Ukraine on our mind. Their bravery and courage has changed the politics of the world in a very short amount of time. Germany has reversed its long-standing anti-military stance. The Swiss, long known for their neutrality, have actually taken a stance here and joined the condemnation of Putin's aggression. Even allies of Putin like China and Cuba have not been overtly supportive of this adventure in Ukraine. As this dictator's violence continues to kill civilians, you will only see him grow more and more isolated as a world leader. In fact, there's even a bipartisan consensus that's been sort of forming against Putin. And this is great, since so many Republicans very recently have said some very supportive things about Vladimir Putin. But it's good to find places where we can work together. Take Elise Stefanik. She's the number 3 Republican in the House from New York's 21st District. Now, Elise Stefanik apparently is no fan of Vladimir Putin. I mean, just listen to her talk about Russia's involvement in the 2016 presidential election that helped Donald Trump get elected.
According to the 2017 Intelligence Community Assessment produced by the CIA, NSA, and FBI, and an indictment issued by the Attorney General in 2018, it is clear that Russian actors conspired to interfere and influence U.S. political processes and the presidential election in 2016. Russian President Vladimir Putin ordered an influence campaign in 2016 aimed at the U.S. presidential election. Russia's goals were to undermine public faith in the U.S. democratic process.
So at least at some point, Representative Stefanik understood that Trump's ascension to the presidency had, at least in some small part, Vladimir Putin to thank. But in an absolute twist, Elise Stefanik joined the 147 traitorous Republicans who voted to throw out a free and fair election in 2020. That's right, after the 2020 presidential election and a resounding defeat for Donald Trump, 147 House Republicans, Representative Stefanik among them, attempted to throw out the 2020 election, which now seems it may have been part of a criminal conspiracy cooked up by the former president. So that just shows you the kind of divide that we can bridge here. I mean, she's now on board. Listen to the statement she issued after Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Listen to how reasonable and how in line with the Biden administration this sounds. I join the American people in praying for the safety of innocent Ukrainians as they endure an unwarranted and unjustified invasion by a gutless, bloodthirsty, authoritarian dictator. Vladimir Putin is a war criminal and a deranged thug. We must stand with democracies under assault. Yeah, a statement of support followed by some pejorative attacks on the aggressor? All right, fine. I heartily agree with this statement, Ms. Stefanik. This is the kind of strong condemnation that you can build a bipartisan consensus on, isn't it? I mean, it's a little weird that you and 146 of your House friends went and tried to, overthrow our democracy, and now you're standing up in support of democracies, but whatever, we will hash that out after Ukraine's safe. What else you got? If peace is to prevail, the United States and NATO must respond with the only language Putin understands: strength. It's long past time President Biden takes swift and devastating action to cripple the Russian economy and impose severe, irrecoverable consequences on the corrupt regime of Vladimir Putin. And again, I largely agree with this statement. Minor quibble. The first sentence to me seems to imply sort of like a military response, and I think you want to be, understands, at least some folks are going to read it that way. So you want to be clear, as President Biden has, that America is not seeking war with Russia. We do not seek a ground war with Russia, but we are going to support our Ukrainian allies, and we are not going to trade with an aggressor. But unless I'm missing something, Elise Stefanik and Joe Biden are in lockstep. Let's talk sanctions. Not only has the U.S. imposed sanctions, which is the easy part, but we've been able to bring along the rest of the world as well. Take a look at what TLDR News is saying.
Governments around the world have imposed a whole load of sanctions on Russia in response to Putin's war in Ukraine. Western governments have been joined by a whole load of other countries. Monaco and Switzerland have committed to mirroring EU sanctions, while Singapore, Japan and South Korea have recently unveiled their own set of sanctions. Even China has limited dollar-denominated state bank financing for Russian commodities. These sanctions were also accompanied by a whole load of action from private sector companies. Shell, BP and Equinor all exited their stakes from Russian gas producers, while both Visa and MasterCard blocked Russian banks from their networks. These sanctions are unprecedented and economically destructive for Russia.
So would you look at that? Joe Biden seems to have adopted policies that are really in line with what Elise Stefanik was asking for, a conservative pro-Trump Republican. We got a bridge to build. Here we go. Hooray! Except, and here's the twist, that was only half of Rep Stefanik's statement. The first thing she has to say about the terrible tragedy in Ukraine is this: after just 1 year of a weak, feckless, and unfit president of the United States and commander-in-chief, the world is less safe. So, again, this is the first word in Representative Stefanik's actual statement. It's not a statement of support for the Ukrainian people. It's not a rebuke of Putin and his policy of violence, or even a rebuke of her own party's support for Putin, but an attack on a democratically elected official who's trying to hold together the Western world, who Representative Stefanik sought to have removed by the most undemocratic and illegal means imaginable. Not only is this hypocrisy, but this statement is what is known as an ad hominem attack. Ad hominem means, 1, appealing to feelings or prejudices rather than intellect, or 2, being marked by an attack on an opponent's character rather than as an answer to the contentions made. So when Representative Stefanik lays into Joe Biden like this, she's appealing to the base emotions and prejudices of her political constituents. She's not trying to engage their better intellect. She doesn't want them thinking. She wants to use their prejudices to advance her political brand. She has no interest in these folks examining their prejudices or even challenging them. Notice she's not answering any specific contention, really. She's just saying, like, President Biden is a weak, feckless, all-around bad dude. She doesn't seem to like him. And P.S., Trump ally and GOP Senator Lindsey Graham once said that if you don't like Joe Biden, there's something wrong with you.
If you can't admire Joe Biden as a person, then it's probably you got a problem. You need to do some self-evaluation, because what's not to like?
In all fairness, he'd probably tell you something different now, though. But this first sentence really ought to tell you all you need to know about Rep Stefanik. She's willing to use a time of unimaginable tragedy to try to score political points, rather than address any real issue. But she goes on, rather than peace through strength, we are witnessing Joe Biden's foreign policy of war through weakness. So what does she really mean by this statement? You can read this as support of an armed response if you want. However, you do clarify below that the strength you're talking about is actually economic strength. Right? You're talking about economic sanctions, you're talking about that sort of response, not a kinetic response with the military. But the war by weakness thing, I'm really not sure what she means by that, because the United States is actually at peace for the first time in a long time. And it's thanks to Joe Biden's, really, again, brave and courageous stance in Afghanistan. For the past year, our adversaries around the world have been assessing and measuring Joe Biden's leadership on the world stage. And he has abysmally failed on every metric. So there are a few logical fallacies, at work here. And bravo, Representative Stefanik, for building such a multifaceted, fallacious argument to dissect. First, consider the logical fallacy known as stacking the deck. Here, a politician will seek to ignore evidence that disproves their point. For instance, it's probably true that every adversary is always assessing and measuring every U.S. president in their leadership on the world stage. Probably also all of our friends, probably every nation on Earth, and a lot of corporations. But then you say that Joe Biden has abysmally failed at every metric. I mean, there's no possible way you could have that data, right? There's absolutely none. Every metric, every single metric, there's not a smile portion of the competition. So this is just it's cousin of what's called the hasty generalization, which is when you say something sort of generally like, oh, you never helped me do the dishes. But here, it's more deliberate. Representative Stefanik is being deliberately deceitful in her use of this fallacious argument. From kinetic and deadly attacks on our allies and partners, to the catastrophic withdrawal and surrender in Afghanistan, to cyber attacks impeding American industry and infrastructure, to today's Russian invasion of Ukraine, Joe Biden and his administration have failed America and the world. That's a very long sentence. And this, again, is stacking the deck. This is building an argument based off of, like, kind of half-truths and not-truths. And we'll break it apart just a little bit. Let's see. From kinetic and deadly attacks on our allies and partners. I honestly don't know what Rep Stefanik is referring to here, except for maybe Russia and Ukraine, I think. If you have any ideas, let me know in the comments below. What kinetic and deadly attacks on our allies and partners besides Ukraine have been going on? Maybe I don't know. To the catastrophic withdrawal and surrender in Afghanistan. See, we've talked about this before. Afghanistan pulling out was the right decision. Whatever you want to talk, however you want to split this, Afghanistan was the 100% right decision. But Rep Stefanik is again sneaking in on another little false dichotomy fallacy. The only two choices the United States had was to stay and win or leave and surrender. And that's not true. She's quite aware that it's not true. The United States completely lost in Afghanistan. The government we supported was built upon the backs of warlords who the people hated. They eventually turned to the Taliban because at least they could keep the warlords under control. We lost the people. There is no winning. The only choices in Afghanistan was to remain there indefinitely and boost up force numbers again to tens of thousands and result in body bags coming back to America, or to leave. Now, as someone who has family members who have served, I would rather leave. I don't want my family dying for the government of the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan. Miss Stefanik, maybe you feel differently, but I'm quite happy we left. And let's not forget that it was Donald Trump who signed the surrender agreement. It was him who agreed and set the timeline for withdrawal from Afghanistan. And that's your guy, Representative Stefanik. You can't pin that on Joe Biden. So this is a lie you're going to hear Republicans engage in about Afghanistan, and I encourage you to call it out. It is a lie when you hear it. It's deliberately dishonest. To cyber attacks impeding American industry and infrastructure. What about the American government? See, here's a key piece of information Rep Stefanik is leaving out, that while cyber attacks have been on the rise for a long time, the largest ever cyber attack occurred under the watch of Donald Trump. It occurred after he lost the 2020 election, where instead of being president and managing the COVID crisis and defending our country, he was cooking up a fraud scheme to try to steal an election. Would the largest ever cyber attack in history have occurred if the government wasn't, like, completely destabilized by this nutcase? I just wish Republicans cared as much about keeping Americans safe as they did about blaming other people for their failures. I really do. To today's Russian invasion of Ukraine. Rep Stefanik, come on. The United States and the UK have been instrumental in arming the Ukrainian resistance before the invasion. We were one of the few countries that were doing so. We raised the alarm when other countries were sort of lulled into passivity, believing Vladimir Putin would not invade. And the response, the way Joe Biden has led the globe and brought us together, brought NATO together, brought the EU together, and even unaffiliated countries. We will isolate and break the economic will or ability of Russia to fight. But go on, you were trying to build a bad faith argument. Joe Biden and his administration have failed America and the world. All right, call me crazy, but whoever wrote this first paragraph, should talk to the person who wrote the second paragraph. They'd probably not agree with each other on a lot of things. I mean, look at that second part again. Here we have legitimate agreement. We have a bipartisan consensus in the make. And, no, this political chameleon, Rep Stefanik, has to just, poison the well with these, superfluous bad faith attacks. Get a life. The world is under attack. We need to come together. Stop engaging in petty politics. So, hey, New York 21st District, this is why Congress is broken. Send us better people. So, I hope you enjoyed that twist. Even though she agrees with economic sanctions, even though she knows Russia is a threat, Elise Stefanik is more concerned with trying to score political points than address a genuine crisis. You can't believe these people when they say they want to build bipartisan bridges, because you don't release these kinds of statements if you believe in bipartisanship. And I know, gasp, a politician is a big phony. Wilder tales have been told. But think about this. Elise Stefanik is the number 3 Republican in the House. She will probably win re-election. If you are voting for any Republican, you're voting to give her more power. Just think about that before you cast that vote. But anyway, that's it for me. You've been great. I hope to see you again next time. But until then, keep thinking.